When August comes to our valley, the air thickens into something almost touchable, like wading through heated honey. Cicadas drill the daylight with their relentless pulse, and the asphalt out on Highway 7 sweats tar that clings to your soles. Even the river forgets how to hurry, flattening into a glass that reflects only heat-shattered light. August is when everything that can melt does, including the boundaries between what we feel and what we claim we feel. My sister May was born into August, sharp noon. Windows flung open, a box fan rattling on the dresser as mother labored alone. Father missed the birth. A pill bottle rattled somewhere else that afternoon, offering counterfeit serenity. The nurse later said May emerged already smiling, as if she'd heard the world's worst joke and decided to reply with grace. They named her for the month of blossoms, not the one that scalded her first breath, but August remained branded in her bones. Growing up, she carried that heat like an inner lantern. At school concerts, her slightest grin calmed a gymnasium packed with folding chairs and parental expectation. At church potlucks, widows in pastel cardigans rested their trembling hands on her head, saying she was lit from within. I'd watch their trembling stop, see their shoulders loosen, and wonder what it cost her each time someone siphoned a little warmth. My own smile always arrived on a delay. If it arrived at all, I let the brim of my cap shadow my eyes. Teachers noted that I observed more than participated, a polite translation of hollowness. May never asked me to be different. She simply pressed her radiance against the dark like a nightlight wedged under a door. I hated her for that gentleness. I also knew it was saving me in ways I refused to name. Father's decline was not a cliff, but a long gravel slope. First the injury at the mill, then the OxyContin in scripts, then the limp, then the layoffs, then the shuffle from kitchen to recliner like a tide that never reached shore. Eventually he became vapor, still breathing, but dispersed through the house in layers of sighs and stale chemicals. When he vanished altogether, truck gone, voicemail husk left behind, neighbors whispered midlife storm as if it were weather he'd returned from. They visited with casseroles, but they sought May's smile more than mother's answers. I found my own refuge in motion. Sunrise runs past the railroad trestle, notebooks filled with sketches of places I'd never seen but trusted were kinder. In hallways I became architectural detail, baseboard, doorknob, present yet unaddressed. May continued to glow. She anchored every room mother couldn't bear to enter, rinsed every dish father left in the sink, laughed at jokes nobody else heard so the silence wouldn't feel accused. And each time her joy flickered, she bit it back until her teeth hid behind dimples that belonged on someone less exhausted. Then August returned, humid as prophecy. One evening the cicadas cut power to the dusk with their electric chant, and I fled the house to keep from drowning in stale air. When I came back hours later, shirt stuck to my ribs, sneakers clay-soaked, I found a small lantern resting against my bedroom door. No card, no explanation, just a glass orb no bigger than an apple, wired to an LED flame that danced inside like captive sunrise. I turned it over in my palms. The light pulsed amber, not bright enough to banish dark corners but relentless enough to remind you they existed. The switch was hidden. The glow felt self-born, like breath trapped in crystal. I set it on the nightstand and stared until the room receded, walls dissolving into dusk. Something in me buckled, the final joist in a scaffolding of practiced indifference, and the tears came, obscene and infantile. They tasted of metal and missing father, and the bruise of always being the colder sibling. I did not cry for pain. Pain was wallpaper. I cried because her gift, small, thoughtless in its simplicity, told the truth I'd spent years dodging. She could not stop giving light, even to someone who never learned to receive it without tallying the debt. Her kindness mirrored my hunger back at me, and hunger, once illuminated, resembles accusation. I woke before sunrise, the lantern still glowing soft as marrow beside the bed. Outside, the first blue of morning slipped under the shade trees. Cicadas slept off their own frenzy, and the town lay in that pre-dawn truce when nothing asks for anything. I carried the lantern to the backyard, held it up to the paling sky. The flame flickered once, then steadied, as if confirming it could coexist with daylight. I wondered how long May's battery could last, how much charge one heart could store before dimming. The river behind our lot mumbled over stones. I considered hurling the orb into that slow current, setting it adrift like some votive meant for deities of mercy, believing maybe the light would travel farther than I could follow. Instead, I placed it on the porch rail and stepped back inside. May sat at the kitchen table, coffee steaming in chipped porcelain, calculus book open but unattended. Her smile, tired, honest, met me with neither question nor defense. In that moment, I understood the real cost of a borrowed lantern. Once you've accepted its glow, you can't pretend you prefer darkness. August leaned against the windows, breath fogging the glass. The day ahead would scold, and the air would bend above asphalt. and the river would forget how to hurry. But for now, a fragile truce lingered, thin as the filament inside that glass orb, yet bright enough to etch the inside of my ribs. I poured a second cup of coffee, set it beside her book, and managed something unrusted in my throat that might have been a thank you. Her shoulders eased, as if I'd plucked a single stone from the mountain she carried. The lantern on the rail caught sunrise and flashed once, brief as a promise, then settled into steady burn. Long after the sun scalded the dew off the grass, that lantern kept breathing beside the porch rail, an ember refusing to resolve into either flame or ash. I tried to ignore it, burying myself in errands that August invents for the restless. Oil changes, library returns, a half-hearted sweep of the garage where father's empty tool chest still smelled of solvent and cheap cigars. But each time I circled back home, the orb caught my peripheral vision like a low moon at the wrong horizon, insisting I translate its pulse into meaning. May spent the next days working double shifts at the diner down by the turnpike, collecting smiles the way a meadow collects pollen. She claimed she liked the pace, plates spun, coffee refilled, tips folded into origami cranes she lined along the dashboard of her rusted Corolla. Yet every evening when she climbed the porch steps, her shoulders sagged half an inch lower, as though gravity recalibrated itself to the exact weight of unseen grief. I wanted to ask her what the lantern meant. Why that night? Why my door? But questions about kindness feel greedy when you've hoarded silence this long. So instead, I loitered in adjacent rooms, pretending to read while she pretended not to notice my orbit. We shared space the way parallel lines share a plane, always near, never touching. On the fourth night, the valley lost power, a transformer blew somewhere past the river, and the streetlights snapped off mid-sentence. The sudden dark felt theatrical, an intake of breath from the whole town. Cicadas paused, then resumed at half volume, as though uncertain who cued the blackout. Windows up and down our block filled with the jitter of phone screens and battery lanterns. In our house, May's glass orb flared brighter, its LED wick sharpening into something almost fierce. We carried it to the living room, setting it on the coffee table like a provisional sun. Shadows diluted around its radius. Dust motes performed slow ballets in the amber cone. May tucked her knees under her chin and admitted softly, "The battery's dead. It shouldn't be this bright." She sounded less amazed than resigned, the way you might acknowledge rain in a drought, relief laced with foreboding. Outside, a distant engine backfired, then another. Figures appeared at the edges of the yard. Neighbor kids, flashlights darting. Mr. Lansing from 2 doors down, dragging a cooler, cheeks pink with opportunistic beer. They gravitated toward our porch as moths do. Heat-seeking heat. May opened the door before they knocked. Within minutes, our living room turned communal. Glow-stick bracelets on toddlers, someone's Bluetooth speaker exhaling soft soul, Mrs. Lansing distributing ice-sweating bottles of cola, all of them drawn, instinctively, to the brighter-than-physics lantern. I hovered in the hallway, irritated at how easily joy infiltrated our dim house, yet transfixed too, by the way. May's face eased when she lit other faces. She moved through the crowd, refilling chips, laughing at half-jokes, her outline limned by the lantern's improbable flame. For once, the light didn't appear to be draining her. It seemed to cycle back, brighter each time someone smiled. But joy, like current, invites overload. At 10 p.m., a stranger arrived. A wiry man in coveralls streaked with engine grease, ball cap shadowing sun-leathered eyes. He leaned against our threshold, studying the orb with a hunger that prickled my scalp. The room fell hush-struck. May stepped forward, polite, asking if he needed water. He said nothing, just watched the flames stutter inside the glass. Then he looked at me. "You the one who hides." His voice carried the flinty echo of distant counties, a twang father once had before pills dulled every consonant. I felt marrow curdle. May noticed, touched my elbow, but the man smirked. "Didn't think you'd want folks crowding your house. Thought you liked shadows." Mrs. Lansing cleared her throat, suggested checking whether the freezer needed ice. The man ignored her, his gaze locked on May's mouth, on the smile she hadn't yet offered him. "Bet that light's worth a fortune to somebody," he mused. "Could burn all winter." May folded her arms, posture straight, chin high. "It's not for sale." He shrugged, scraping boots on the mat. Things change hands in a blackout. Before anyone reacted, the lantern's glow intensified, an audible surge like breath drawn through a flute. The glass orb pulsed once, twice. Every flashlight in the room flickered off simultaneously, as if jealous of a brighter sibling. The stranger stepped back, palm raised. The orb's light condensed, shrinking inward until it was no more than a coal, then burst outward, flooding the room with white, so pure, I saw the bones in my hands etched against skin. A collective gasp, and the power snapped on, ceiling lamp blinding. refrigerator grinding to life. When vision cleared, the stranger was gone. The orb sat dormant, its LED wick extinguished, glass cool to the touch. Neighbors murmured apologies and filtered outside, shaken but unharmed. May and I remained still as soot after flame. Finally, she whispered, "I don't know how it did that." Her voice wavered on the edge of awe and dread. I knelt, lifted the lantern. Inside, the filament string had burned out, wire melted into a shape that resembled two ribs curving toward each other like a cradle, or maybe a cage. No battery remained, only a cavity that smelled faintly of ozone. "What was he to you?" she asked. "Nobody." The answer tasted like nickel, like pennies sucked too long, but the truth rustled behind my ribs. I recognized the man's posture, the brittle tilt of his grin. Father had worn that same expression the evening before he left, part desire, part shame, wholly famished for a warmth he believed already belonged to him. Whether the stranger was kin or ghost, his hunger felt hereditary. May brushed glass dust from my palm. "Does the kindness still feel like accusation?" she asked, so soft I barely caught it. I stared at the hollow lantern, emptied now of both light and threat, and knew the accusation had shifted. It wasn't her generosity indicting me anymore. It was my refusal to hold it when it strained. If love is a current, resistance breeds heat, and heat demands release somewhere, in pills, in disappearances, in strangers at doorways. Thunder mumbled in distant hills, promising rain to quell August's tyrant heat. I set the dead lantern on the sill where dawn would find it. Then I made coffee for 2 at midnight. Each scoop a small concession to the idea that warmth, poured carefully, needn't consume its source. We sat at the kitchen table, cicadas easing their dirge outside. I lifted my mug, met May's tired, naked eyes, and managed a sentence with no aftertaste of rust. "If the light comes back, let's learn to share the battery." She exhaled, half laughter, half sob. Outside, the first raindrops tapped the roof, shy yet insistent, like fingertips rehearsing a new rhythm. The power held, the house stayed bright, and for the first time since Father dissolved into haze, August smelled less like molten tar, more like earth deciding to forgive the sky. How do we carry fire without branding each other, and how do we dim without vanishing? August's rain never lasts. By dawn the sky had wrung itself dry, leaving beads of humidity clinging to shingles like sweat that forgot its owner. I woke to the percussive drip of cedar eaves, and the muted whir of cicadas recalibrating their volume for post-storm haze. The dead lantern squatted on the sill, grey glass dull as a pocket stone. May slept curled on the sofa, coffee mug empty on the floor beside her hand, its half-moon handle echoing the crescent of her spine. Even drained of light, she looked luminous, as though brightness had found new doorways beneath her skin. I needed distance. I laced my running shoes and slipped outside. Steam breathed off asphalt. Puddles mirrored telephone wires like black notation on a temporary staff. I ran harder than usual, chasing a rhythm faster than thought. But thoughts draft-like behind effort. Father's missing grin, the stranger's threat, the lantern's impossible surge. Each mile, the questions tightened until breath tasted ferric. Near the old mill I stopped, palms on knees, chest heaving. The mill loomed skeletal, windows punched out, corrugated walls rust-flayed. Abandoned since the opioid lawsuits, it was now a mausoleum for broken machinery, and rumor claimed a gathering place for after-hours scavengers hunting copper coils and loose change. On impulse I followed a cinder path through weeds to a loading bay shadowed with graffiti. Inside, cavern gloom swallowed the rising sun, and the air smelled of mildew, motor oil, and something sharper, ozone. In the center of the floor lay half a dozen shattered lanterns, cheap glass orbs identical to May's gift, their LED guts splayed. Extension cords snaked across concrete to a squat generator, silent now but warm. Someone had been milking the little lamps, overvolting LEDs until they burst like seeds in fire. A ledger sat open on an overturned crate, columns labeled units harvested and cash advanced. Next to it, a pocket scale dusted with white crystals, fentanyl sparkle, my gut iced. On the ledger's margin, a single scribbled phrase stood out. Smile first, cost later. Handwriting crooked, desperate. Father's, no. The angles were too sharp, a younger tremor. But the statement cleaved me, an economy of radiance, extracting glow until filaments snap. I pulled out my phone, snapped photos of the wreckage. A floorboard creaked behind me. I spun. The stranger from the blackout leaned against a rusted pulley, arms folded. Trespassing twice in 1 week, he drawled. In daylight his eyes were paler, almost colorless, like water that has forgotten sky. I could call the county, I said. voice thinner than courage. He shrugged. Tell 'em what? Broken toys? He nudged a ruined lantern with his boot. The bulb rolled, spilling glass beads that caught a shaft of light and flared, the same fierce white I'd seen at home, but only for an instant before they dimmed to ash. You're draining them, I whispered. Only what's there to take. He stepped closer, breath ripe with burnt sugar. People pay for light, kid. They'll pay anything. He flicked a shard toward me. It skittered across the floor, pinging like a coin. Your sister's got the richest vein I've ever seen. Heat ignited behind my ribcage. Anger, fear, an older protective flame I'd never admitted to owning. She's not merchandise. He smirked. She's already selling. Every smile, every easy laugh. She gives it away, and folks get addicted. I just bottle the residue. My fist tightened. Get out. I will, he said, backing toward daylight pooling at the bay door. But consider the math. Her battery drains. Somebody fills it with pills, booze, compliments, whatever currency. Debt gets heavy. Sooner or later, she'll need alternatives. He tapped the side of his nose, a conspiratorial gesture, then vanished into sun. I staggered from the mill, pulse cannoning my temples. The town looked unchanged. School bus rumbling, dog barking at nothing, but every face I passed seemed freshly hungry, mouths parted in expectation of light, they believed forthcoming. At home, May brewed tea, the dead lantern dissected on newspaper. Tiny screws, LED chip, empty battery cavity. I wanted to see how it worked, she said without looking up. I blurted what I'd found, words tripping over one another. Smashed orbs, fentanyl, the stranger's threats. Her hands stilled, steam curled from the mug like a question losing patience. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Her voice was level, but the air quivered. Because I searched for something other than fear. Because I've been hiding behind your glow. She met my gaze. In her pupils, I saw the same exhaustion I'd always envied for its grace, now stripped bare. I'm tired, she whispered, but that doesn't mean I'm empty. Down the hall, a cupboard door slammed. Wind or memory? We both flinched. May inhaled, gathering something fragile. Help me rebuild it, she said, gesturing to the dismantled lantern. But this time, no battery, no burn, just reflection. Light that belongs to whoever stands in front of it. We spent the afternoon soldering. I etched the glass with a diamond tip, fracturing the inner surface into facets. She rewired the LED to draw power only from ambient light, photovoltaic sliver cannibalized from a garden lamp. When we finished, the orb held no flame, only a soft shimmer that intensified when placed by a window, fading gently in darkness. That evening, we carried the lantern to the porch rail. Sunset glazed the valley. Cicadas struck up their metallic anthem. The orb caught the dying light, multiplied it in fractured gleams, then released it back as a low hum of color, no longer a beacon, just a mirror for whatever brightness dusk was willing to lend. Neighbors emerged, curious. They approached but did not enter. Instead, they paused at the sidewalk, watching the lantern glow in synchrony with the sky, seeing perhaps for the first time that the light was theirs to amplify or let dim. No withdrawals, no debts. Inside, May slumped against the doorframe, eyes rimmed red but calm. If they want warmth, she said, they can bring their own matches. Later, alone, I typed an anonymous email to the county sheriff with the mill photos attached. I did not mention May. I did not mention the stranger's prophecy. Instead, I wrote, there's a market for stolen light. Shut it down before someone overdoses on dark. Power lines buzzed overhead, steady current against looming night. The new lantern flickered, brief, tentative, then steadied. August heat lingered but felt survivable, as though even the air had decided to carry its own burden for once. How do we measure radiance once we stop mistaking depletion for love? August's back half arrived with no thunder to declare it, just a slow saturation, as though each daylight hour exuded another layer of invisible resin. You could feel it harden on your skin, sealing sweat and second thoughts beneath a glaze that reflected sun but trapped every impulse that wanted to breathe. The county fair erected its Ferris wheel on the football field, lights flickering even in noon glare, a carnival promise of escape that smelled of diesel, funnel cake, and generational déjà vu. May and I kept the rebuilt lantern on the porch, glass now etched into a hive of prisms. It glowed only when dusk shared a pulse, dying each dawn like a spent star. We called it the reciprocal, a name half scientific, half prayer. Neighbors still paused at the fence, but instead of siphoning its brightness, they lingered and then continued down the block, carrying whatever reflection they'd found. A few left small offerings, a mason jar of homegrown mint, a dog-eared mystery novel, A Polaroid of last summer's eclipse. Light, I learned, can travel sideways as easily as forward. Yet night kept inventing new darkness. 3 days after we outed the mill, the sheriff's cruiser idled at our curb. No sirens, just a polite gloom. Deputy Clark trudged up the walk, hat in hand, sweat scribing dark VAs down his uniform spine. He said they'd raided the site at dawn, found nothing but smashed LEDs, fractured glass, and the lingering smell of scorched wires. The ledger I'd photographed was gone, extension cords severed, generator missing. Whoever ran that operation, Clark muttered, moved on before we could flip the switch. His eyes drifted to the reciprocal, its facets catching noon glare. You two take care, he added, tone pivoting from official to fatherly. Some folks don't ask permission before rewiring other people's wattage. May thanked him, voice level, but once he drove off she folded inward, arms across ribs as though holding shut a door beneath her sternum. I wanted to break the silence with reassurance, yet every phrase felt counterfeit. Nothing I'd built could insulate her from a world convinced brightness should be harvested, not shared. That night, she didn't come home from the diner. 10:30 passed, then midnight brewed heavy in the rafters. I paced the hallway, pulse chafing cartilage. Her phone rang unanswered. The manager claimed she'd clocked out at 9, looked tired but okay. I scanned the roads in the old truck, headlights dissolving into blackberry thickets and utility poles slouching under cable weight. All routes eventually curled back to the mill, trespass tape fluttering like ragged wings under crescent moonlight, but the yard lay empty. At 3 a.m., I found her Corolla parked at Overlook Bridge, rusted grille, kissing the guardrail. The reciprocal sat on the hood, unlit. May perched on the safety rail beyond, bare feet inches from the Black River splice glinting far below. Street lamp sodium carved her outline into amber bone. I approached slow, gravel cracking like dry ice.
You scare easy,
she murmured without turning. Her voice carried no tears, just a fatigue so dense it bent the surrounding quiet.
I wasn't going to jump.
I know, but I didn't know, not enough to trust gravity's indifference. She thumbed the empty lantern. Doesn't work out here. No ambient light to echo. Wind lifted her hair. Moonlit strands looked silver, as though August had bleached even pigment. I tried to feel what it's like to be as empty as this thing, so nobody can siphon anything else. A semi growled on the distant highway, its Doppler wail smearing the horizon. I stepped beside her, gripping the rail's chill metal. Water rushed beneath, a hush vast enough to swallow both our shadows. Being empty won't stop them, I said. They'll just call it mystery and dig harder. She laughed, soft, serrated. You sound like Dad. The comparison knifed through me. Yet she continued, eyes fixed on the river seam. He always thought if he disappeared enough, nobody would notice when the pills emptied him out. I started to defend, then stopped. Some ghosts are best unspoken, lest they orbit back brighter. Instead, I unclasped the beam of my phone, angled it toward the reciprocal. Light rebounded through the etched facets, filling the orb with a low, celestial bruise. Not a blaze, more a breathing coal. May's shoulders eased a fraction. See, I offered, borrowed light, we give it back. She turned the orb slowly, watching shards skitter. What if one day, I've got nothing left even to borrow? Then we use mine, I said, and meant it, but feared the math. My reservoir felt shallow, a cracked cistern painted to resemble depth. Back home, dawn gnawed the horizon. While May slept, I dug through Father's old boxes, sifting past bastard bolts, receipts for prescriptions, a drawing I'd once made of the family with my own head erased. In the far corner, a fuse tester, a spool of twine, and a tin containing 3 intact lanterns, identical to the smashed batch from the mill, wires unsinged. A note in scrawled pen, 4M spares. My stomach dropped. Father had been hoarding replacements, maybe for May's inevitable burnout, insurance on a light he'd failed to protect in person. Rage flared at his absence, at his foresight, at the implication that her gift was a consumable part. I nearly pitched the box into the trash, but something in the metallic rattle whispered caution. That afternoon, the diner phone rang. May's manager, frantic. May had collapsed refilling coffee, eyes rolling back, pulse thready, ambulance en route. A stampede of worst-case images sprinted my veins, filaments twining around her heart. A stranger's syringe, my own failure to intercept hunger. At County General the fluorescence bruised every shadow. A nurse said heat exhaustion. Doctor muttered electrolyte crash. They dripped saline into her arm, and color returned slow as dawn across coal dust. She woke asking for water, no halo, no mystical pulse, just human thirst. I gripped her hand, feeling bones fragile as hollow glass. In the sterile hush I understood, her brightness was not infinite. It was metabolized, calories, volts, whatever physics governs empathy. The world's appetite could bankrupt her body before soul had time to fear the ledger. That night, the stranger called my phone. Unknown ID, yet his sigh hummed like stripped copper. "The mine's closed," he said, voice low. "But the seam's still there. Thought you should know." A click, dead line. I stared at the dark phone screen until my reflection blurred. Did he threaten or warn? Either way, extraction would migrate from LEDs to flesh if profit demanded. I opened father's tin, retrieved one intact lantern. In the workshop I etched the glass deeper, lines intersecting until facets fractured into near powder. I soldered the LED not to a battery, but to an old pulse sensor, salvaged from an exercise watch, so it would glow only with the wearer's heartbeat. I placed it on my desk and slipped gauze around my palm where glass had bitten. The filament fluttered in tune with vein throb, a light less about brilliance than proof of living. May returned home pale but upright. I gave her the new lantern. "It takes nothing you don't already have," I said, "and if it dims, that means you need rest, not rescue." She traced the etched web, eyes glinting relief, edged by doubt. "And if someone steals it? Then they get a dead bulb and a pulse that isn't theirs." I didn't add, "Maybe they'll learn what empty really means." Outside, August rehearsed its exit, locusts dying into crisp hush, honeysuckle browning on fences. The reciprocal hummed on the porch, reflecting dusk's last embers. Inside, May's heartbeat flickered her lantern alive, dimmed when she yawned, bloomed when she laughed at a distant sitcom line. Light equivalence to life, a meter rather than a mine. Yet as I lay awake, screens off, ceiling fan chopping humid dark, a question kept spiraling like gnats around porch light. If we meter our glow to fit the heart's cadence, will the world slow its hunger or sharpen its teeth for whatever brilliance remains unmeasured? September slid in beneath August's blistered skin, the way evening fog slides between split river stones, quiet, insistent, merciful, only because mercy was overdue. The cicadas bowed out, leaving ragged husks clinging to bark like abandoned declarations. Every sunrise advanced a few minutes later, smuggling coolness into the valley before the asphalt could remember how to burn. May healed slowly, like glass annealing 1 degree at a time. The doctor prescribed electrolytes and stress reduction, which is medical shorthand for tasks no wage clock recognizes. She cut back to half shifts at the diner, and on days off she napped, mouth open in the honest way children sleep. The new pulse-fed lantern kept watch on her nightstand, its filament brightening only when her dreams slipped toward unease. In those moments I would ease the bedroom door wider, and the glow would subside as her breathing steadied. I told myself the pulse sensor was only a circuit, but some nights the light felt like a small patient animal, purring whenever the heart it monitored found turbulence. The stranger's voice did not return, yet its echo nested in voicemail static, in the cough of distant mufflers, in the way porch boards creaked under emptiness after midnight. The sheriff's office posted a reward for theft of industrial equipment, but everyone in town heard the subtext: "Keep your eyes open for men who barter misfortune for wattage." One crisp evening, the school announced a lantern parade to celebrate the equinox, an event born from PTA ingenuity and power grid fragility. Families were to bring homemade lights and walk the downtown loop to usher autumn in with brightness we make ourselves. The idea felt both corny and necessary, like singing happy birthday to a 100-year-old aunt who's forgotten your face but remembers the melody and smiles. May wanted to attend. I felt both protective and reluctant. Parades attract hunger as porch lamps attract moths. Still, she'd ceded so much terrain to exhaustion. "We'll build something together," she insisted, eyes flaring cobalt with unspent voltage. I nodded, surrendering to the current. We scavenged materials: mirror shards from a broken makeup compact, copper wire filched from father's forgotten coil, dried milkweed pods bleached papery white. May proposed a heartbeat chain, several small bulbs wired in series, each pulse activated, so they'd glow only when walkers held them close. Connection was the circuit. Let go and the light would fade. The metaphor felt on the nose, but sometimes noses need punching with truth. The night of the parade, temperature hovered at 72, the sky clear enough to embarrass planets. Main Street smelled of kettle corn, and hay bales rolled to double as seating. We arrived just after dusk. Hundreds of makeshift lanterns bobbed, mason jars filled with fairy lights, paper bags punched with constellations, even a repurposed fishbowl swirling with neon aquarium gravel and a string of LEDs. Our heartbeat chain drew curious glances. Each bulb pulsed faintly as we passed it hand to hand through the forming procession. At the starting horn, the brass section from the high school band launched into a sluggish rendition of "This Little Light of Mine." The crowd laughed and joined the stumble of song. Children darted ahead, lanterns swinging like tiny planets freed from orbital math. May walked beside me, cheeks flushed with something that looked like unqualified joy. The bulb in her palm brightened, throwing fractured rainbows from the compact mirrors we'd glued around its rim. Halfway down Commerce Street, the power to the street lamps failed. Transformer fatigue or sabotage, no one knew. A murmur rippled, part thrill, part unease. In that electric hush, our homemade sky intensified. 1,000 pocket suns multiplied against shop windows, turning display glass into kaleidoscopes of moving color. For the first time, darkness looked staged, deliberate, an emptied theater waiting for the crowd to recognize themselves as performers. Then I saw him, the stranger, leaning against the doorway of the shuttered pawn shop, body wrapped in shadow, but face lit by the crowd's diffused glow. His eyes found May. Her bulb flared, as though recognition were a surge protector failing. He pushed off the jam, slipping into the march behind a cluster of teenagers. I felt the old anger ignite, phosphorus on bone. I pressed forward, weaving through lanterns, but May's hand gripped my sleeve. "Let him see," she whispered. "He can't steal what's moving." The parade reached the courthouse lawn and formed a slow whirl, lights lifted overhead. Someone cut the band, voices rose in an ad hoc hum, not quite hymn, not quite lullaby. Our heartbeat bulbs passed from palm to palm, charging, dimming, brightening, a visible EKG of communal pulse. I tracked the stranger's silhouette in the rotating glow. He extended a hand toward each passing light, but every time someone released a bulb, it dulled before his fingers closed. After several tries, frustration contorted his features into a grimace that looked suspiciously like grief. Under the courthouse arch, he finally faced me. Lanternless, desperate, he mouthed a silent question I could not read, then turned and walked into deeper dark, his outline thinning until it fused with night. I felt no triumph. Predators don't starve when a single hunt fails. They adapt, learn new prey. Yet in that moment, the lantern chain proved a small theorem. Radiance in transit refuses capture. The cost of hoarded light is always hunger. The price of shared glow is only attention. When the parade dissolved, families tucked bulbs into coat pockets, the remaining brightness curling upward like spent campfire. Street lamps flickered back, a stutter, then steady amber. May and I headed home through hushed neighborhoods. At the porch, the reciprocal awaited, its etched facets gathering leftovers of starlight. It shimmered as we climbed the steps. But tonight I noticed new refractions, other colors, pale green and rose, as though it had learned additional wavelengths from the town's collective lanterns. Inside, May set her heartbeat bulb on the kitchen counter and watched it pulse. Thrum, pause, thrum, slower now, matching fatigue. "I'll sleep," she said, almost apologetic. "Tomorrow I'll wire these mirrors onto fresh ones for the kids who lost theirs." "A relay of light," I said. "More like chain mail," she corrected, stifling a yawn. "Armor we share." She drifted to bed. I lingered in the doorway, listening to floorboards uncoil beneath settling temperature. Overhead, the ceiling fan chopped warm air into smaller, more manageable pieces. The heartbeat bulb dimmed until it became a moonless ember, proof that rest sometimes asks for darkness. I stepped onto the porch. Crickets soared a rhythm under distant drizzle. The reciprocal hummed low, facets aglow with borrowed star milk. I pressed a forefinger to its glass. Warmth pulsed back, faint but alive, as if the valley itself had a circulatory loop, and this lantern was a minor ventricle, learning to pace its beat. A gust lifted dead maple leaves into lazy spirals. Somewhere past the ridge, generator hum announced the stranger's persistence, or maybe father's lingering ghost, still trying to bottle light he never learned to hold. Their hunger was out there, sure as nightfall. But here, for the span of one inhalation, the darkness felt almost equal to the brightness we'd sown. I thought of the bulbs passing from hand to hand, each grip a brief tenure of responsibility, each release an act of faith that somebody else would catch the glow. Perhaps that's all any lantern can promise. Not everlasting flame, but momentary certitude that light exists and moves. The rest, maintenance, boundaries, mercy, belongs to us. The reciprocal's facets skimmed dawn-slanted starlight and shaped it into one more quiet question, reflecting it back into my eyes, until I felt it settle behind my sternum, ticking there like a secondary heart. When the next hand reaches for the light we carry, will we remember that letting go can be the purest form of keeping?